whether that is work, whether that's post-secondary as far as tech school, college, whatever that is. Let's give them the tools and the skills that is needed for whatever's next. Okay? All right, so having said that, we have embarked on a long-range plan. Okay? And first slide is why long-range planning and why now? Okay, there's really basically, if we boil away all this stuff, there's really two reasons for it. One is that we're finally in a financial position to do so. And second of all, when looking long-term, we just couldn't wait to 2015. Okay? I'll explain those a little bit more. First one, fund balance history. When I talk about finally in a financial position to be able to look long-term, when I first arrived here, we were down here with a fund balance. We spent all our time and energy trying to find out how we were going to get to the next year. Okay? We're here, how are we going to survive enough to get to the next year? How are we going to get to the next year? As you can see, we started with $140,000 in the hole as a fund balance, and right now we are projected to be at about a $1.7 million fund balance at the end of this fiscal year. The auditors are going to be coming in and starting their work next week, and then the week after. At that time, we will know what this final number is for our final ending fund balance of this particular year. Whatever you want to say about that is that I believe that this district, this board, this administration has used their resources efficiently. In the 5 years that this board has been in place, or that this administration has been in place, we have not deficit spent 1 year. Okay? That's allowed us to build the fund balance. Second thing is, prior to that, in this district, deficit spent 3 out of the previous 4 years prior to that. Deficit spending means you're spending more than what revenue you're coming in, whether it be state aid or whether it be levy in the form of operating referendum. Okay? In 2010, we heard you need to live within your budget. Live within your means, don't overspend. Okay? We've proven that. We have not overspent. What this has allowed us to do now is to continue to look long term. Second one, when looking long term, we couldn't wait until 2015. This next graph shows what we were looking at during the beginning part of last year and going forward. This is what we were looking at. Okay, here's 2012-13 ending fund balances. 2015-16, we end at 1.1 million, which is what we heard from you folks in 2010. Make sure you get to 2015. We're going to get to 2015, no problem. It's after 2015 and beyond where it becomes a concern. So this is based on our enrollment that we had last year. I think this graph in particular is on 717 students. Okay, here's what happens in 2016-17, 17-18 if the district does nothing. We just keep sailing along. Okay? All right. This year, we started the school year with enrollment of about 741 students. Okay? And again, that fluctuates by day. But at 741 students, okay, now we take a look at our graph going forward. And now I want you to pay attention to one thing here, folks, please. We're starting with 2013-14 there. The previous graph, we're starting with 12-13. Okay? The model that we use, school finance, starts here and moves forward. All right, so 741 students with our current enrollment. Here's what happens. Again, 2015-16 and 16-17. Okay? All right. So as a result of that, here's what we embarked upon. Okay? In January, we hired an independent consultant, ICS, to come in and help us with a long-range plan. Okay? In May, after they did their work, they presented 3 options to our board. In June, we went out to all 5 of our community meetings, presented the options. Gather feedback. Okay? In August, the school board made a decision to have a 2-question ballot in November. And November 5th is election day. Okay? So that is a result of the work from prior to last January. All right, summary of the option that you and I and everyone else in our district will get a chance to vote on November 5th. First one is add a pre-K through 5 addition here to the secondary school. Relocate both North and South elementary schools to the secondary school campus here in Barry. It's a 2-question ballot. First question is a $12.25 million bond for that pre-K through 5 addition. Question 2 is to revoke and replace the current operating levy. Revoke means take it away, and replace. This means replace it. Okay? For 10 years, and the questions are not contingent upon each other, which means number 1 doesn't have to pass for 2 to pass, or vice versa. Okay? They're not contingent upon each other. They're separate questions in and of themselves. Okay? All right. Why this option? Okay, there's basically 5 reasons that the board has discussed throughout the last year or so as to why these 5 or why this option is being brought forth to our voters. Okay? First one, I think it's educationally advantageous to our students. 2, we want to provide a safer and healthier environment for our students. It's fiscally responsible, it reduces expenses, has the least tax impact for the majority of our taxpayers, and it establishes a sustainable long-term plan. Okay? All right. Educationally advantageous. How? How is it? Okay? We believe that it allows more time with students. Our staff is going to spend more time. Let me explain that a little bit. First one, talk about Title I. Title I is a federal program. Okay? We receive funding from the federal government based on the number of free and reduced students we have. That's not the students who get the service, but that's how the funding comes to our district. Okay? Title I goes to serve students in reading and math. Okay? We have X amount of Title I funding, and we in our district choose to use that for services of a certified teacher and paraprofessionals. That goes to fund our Title I services. All right? Our Title I staff person, certified staff person, goes between both North and South. Okay? So she services kids on an every other day basis. Okay? Title I services can be provided every day by that certified staff person. Literacy intervention services every day. Allow for more staff collaboration time. We are trying to do that, bringing our North and our South teachers together. I know Mrs. Suki met with 2 different grade levels today in getting together, looking at the standards, looking at what teachers at both schools are doing, working together. Obviously, in one building, that's much more easily done. Opportunity for our secondary school students to help our elementary students. I know that with our 5th and 6th grade, I'm going to say particularly in our science area, that is happening. Our senior high science students are helping our 5th and 6th graders. And if you go and you look at our science scores, student achievement data, it's making a difference. Okay? Allow continued program for students. For example, Phi-Ed music at the elementary is offered every day in our district. Not all districts have Phi-Ed music every day for the elementary students. We want to continue to provide that. Okay? I say in smaller class sizes. Right now we have at both North and South some larger class sizes in regards to gym and music. Okay? Classes are combined. We want to continue to provide electives at the secondary school. Mr. Osta gave me a sheet this afternoon that has a list of our electives that we offer at the secondary school, and he said it's not an all-inclusive list, but there was 57 courses on there. Okay? 57 courses that our students are able to take as electives. We want to continue to provide those. And, I mean, because someone told me the other day, you know, these courses are what keeps our kids in school, some of them. Okay? Allow for increased programming for both students, both above and below grade levels. Again, more efficient use of our staff time, being able to program together, schedule together to meet the needs of all of our learners. Both the ones that are in the middle, so we can get them to the next level. Students that are here need to get to here. Wherever they are at on that continuum, our goal, our job, is to try to get them to the next level, whatever that level looks like. Okay? Allow for increased student intervention spaces. Okay? What does that mean? It means areas to take small groups of kids or individual kids. Individual students, meet with them, work with them where they're at their needs, or at their level. Okay? We've heard a lot of questions regarding class sizes. Okay? If we come to one spot, our class sizes are going to get really big. Okay? Let's take a look at that. Right now, what this shows here is our kindergarten at North has 2 classes of 19 kids in each class. South has 16 and 15. We're at one campus, they would all be 23. Okay? We have 4 sections, and they go to 3 sections of 23. First grade, same thing. 16, 15, 14, 14. One campus, we have class sizes of 19 and 20. Second grade, same deal. 18, 18, 17, 17. We'd be at 23 and 24. Third grade, 14, 14, 19, 18. Class size of 21, 22. And fourth grade right now, we have one section of 22 and one section of 23. Obviously, that's not going to change. Okay? As an educator, as I spent the majority of my teaching career teaching second grade, the largest class size I had in the 2 districts that I taught in was 29 second graders. Okay? The smallest I ever remember having was 24. Okay? And so, really, the numbers here are well within an advantageous spot for as far as class sizes. Education speak, okay? In our district, according to the Minnesota Department of Education, we have 3 elementary schools. That's how Minnesota MDE breaks them down. We have North, we have South, and we have our 5th and 6th grade. 5th and 6th grade, even though they're in this building, is considered an elementary school as far as reporting purposes go. Okay? According to the MMR, which is multiple measurement rating scales, of which all our schools in the state of Minnesota are graded on, that receive Title I services, our 5th and 6th grade is a reward school. Okay? And is really the top of the level. And so when we look at that, we say, okay, why? What are our 5th and 6th grade doing, and how can we duplicate that or replicate that for our other grade levels, other schools? Well, again, we're not sure, but I do know that our 5th and 6th grade level teachers plan together. Okay, there's 5 of them. They're planning together to meet the needs of all their students. Okay, not just the 24, 25, or whatever they have in their classroom, but they're meeting together to meet the needs of all. How do they do that? They work together to provide extra support via rotation classes. Okay, it's a scheduling piece that they are working with small groups of kids in 5th and 6th grade on a rotation basis in addition to their core classes that they're teaching. Okay? That is good for kids. It allows, and it's allowable, obviously, because they're across the hallway from each other. Okay? Why this option? Okay? Talked about improving the safety and the learning environment. The proposed plan includes having secured entrances at all our schools. Okay? Right now, we don't have secured entrances at any one of our schools. Okay? Improved indoor air quality. ADA compliant. We're not ADA compliant in all of our schools right now. Okay? Just the efficiencies, heating, cooling, lighting. Right now we have, there's some concerns in our elementary schools in regards to filtered power. And we're kind of at the mercy of where we put smartboards and technology. Okay? I think if you visit with our teachers, that's a concern, it's a hindrance. Okay? Why this option? It's fiscally responsible. It reduces district expenses. We heard, and we always continue to hear, you need to cut expenses, you need to reduce expenses. Okay? This plan does that. Okay? We'll zip through this one rather. Right now, this plan would propose these savings. These numbers here are actual money that's gone out in the last year for the utilities at both North and South. Okay. Certified staff and support staff. Okay. Large part of the savings is staff. When 85% of our budget is people, that's how we reduce expenses. Okay? Were we able to reduce expenses? If you refer back to our class sizes, we go from 4 sections to 3. Okay? Certified staff, support staff. Miscellaneous, you add all those up, and you have a total of about $700,000. Okay? Of decreased expenses annually. Now, we also know that if there is an addition spot, building, we have to add that in for the operation and maintenance and care of that facility. So we added that back in, and that's how we come up with our projected annual savings. That's an annual savings. Why this option? It's the least tax impact for the majority of our taxpayers. And there were 2 or more, but there are 2 legislative changes that happened in 2013 that I'll try to explain as well. First one, here's the cost, and this was in the flyer that went out. Okay, but I'll explain these. These are the different property value, the different property types, estimated market values, and the cost to question number 1. Now, I'm going to focus on the average home in our district. The average price home across our district is $100,000. Okay? The homestead residential. The annual tax increase. Now, let me make sure you understand this. The increase over what we're currently paying on a $100,000 home is $38.61. Okay? That's the annual increase in taxes on voter-approved question number 1. I want you to remember that number for a second. Okay? Question number 2. Question number 2 is an operating levy referendum that is revoking on that $100,000 home, revoking 351.15, and replacing with 351.15. That's a wash. The difference there is 0. Okay? The cost of question number 2 is 0. Now, one of the legislative changes that occurred this year is basically taking, we have 2 revenue streams. We have levy, which is operating referendum levy. Okay? Your money, my money coming in. And we have state aid. Okay? What the legislative change is, to the tune of $38.39, is taking money that was normally from levy, taking that away, and putting it on the aid side. Okay? Let's be clear, it's not an increase in funding, it's a decrease to local levy and additional to state aid. Okay? And so this was going to occur whether we're voting or not voting. Okay? This is happening. But that $100,000 home is going to see a decrease of $38.39 because of the legislative change. So the total cost, question 1 and 2, on that $100,000 home is 22 cents per year, an annual increase because of the legislative change. Okay? 22 cents on that particular property. I don't have the property types listed over on the side, but you have those in the flyers. Okay? All right. Now this is basically what I tried to explain here. More state aid, less local levy. It's used to offset operating referendum, equity, and operating capital levies, revenue streams coming into the district. Okay? Again, not an increase in funding, it's just a shift levy to aid. As a result, tax impacts of various properties are going to go down. And there's the example that I've used is on that $100,000 home, average home in our district, additional $38.61 per year. Question 2, tax impact is 0. The result of the legislative changes is negative $38.39 per year, which the total tax impact on that average home for this plan is 22 cents per year. Okay. All right. There's another legislative change that I want to make you aware of, and I have not received many questions about this at all. Right? I want to make sure that you're aware. All right. The first one, and the change incorporates how the levy authority is calculated. Okay? It's based on pupils served now rather than resident pupils. It used to be on resident pupils, and now it's on pupils served. Okay? Which means in 2010 we passed a levy for $1,370 per pupil. Okay? And the amount of that revenue equals about $1.1 million. And that was, they took, the way they get that is 1,370 times the resident pupils. All right? The change occurred, and the new levy authority is based on the new formula, which is pupils served in our district. And so how they figured that was, you took the exact same amount, the exact same total revenue, and divided that by the pupils served, and you come up with your new levy authority. Okay? And so the old 1370 is now the new 1491.57. It's exactly the same. There's no change in how much it costs us as taxpayers. There's no change in how much revenue it generates. It's the way the formula was figured. Okay? And so with question 2, we are seeking 1447.78, which is actually less than the levy authority. Okay? And as a result, it's a 0 tax increase on number 2. Okay? It's a 0 tax increase. All right. Why this option? Okay? Establishes a sustainable long-term plan. We want to talk about sustainable. I know there were many questions 5 years ago when our 5th and 6th graders came and you said, is that going to be sustainable? And I think if you look at the fund balance graph at the beginning of the presentation, that was a sustainable move financially and educationally, as our 5th or 6th graders are in board school. Okay? Sustainable long-term plan. Now, the next 3 graphs, okay, I'm going to try my best to explain the next 3. First one, I get the question a lot. What happens if question 1 fails and question 2 passes? Great question. Here's what happens with that. Again, 13, 14, this is the light blue, or this graph here is what happens to our fund balance if question 1 fails and question 2 passes. Okay? This one is also taking in our new enrollment, our current enrollment, 741. Okay? This graph here shows what happens. Okay? Additional students, revenue carrying it out, gets us to about 1718 and 715,000. Okay? 1819, we would be at 17,000. Now, again, a couple of the assumptions with that are A, staffing remains constant. B, no increased revenue from the state on that aid side. Okay, that stays constant after the 1.5% increase for next year. Okay, we got 1.5% increase this year. We got 1.5% increase for next year. Okay. All right. So that's what happens if we extend our current referendum. This graph shows what happens to our fund balance if we retain 741 students and we're in one campus. Okay? Starting in 2015-16. That's the year. Here's what happens to our fund balance if we retain 741 students. We end up at an 18-19 fund balance of about 2.6 million. Okay? Now, we've had the question, what happens if you close both North and South, you're going to lose kids. Okay? All right? Next graph shows what happens. Now, we could run 100 different graphs here, guys. I mean, you realize that we could say, well, we're going to lose 10 kids, we're going to lose 20, we're going to lose 100, we're going to lose 200. We could run that many graphs, right? Okay? We just ran a graph for, we lose 41 students. Okay? Here's our fund balance. If we're in one facility and we lose 41 students starting in 2015-16, okay? And 18-19, we're still at a $2.1 million fund balance. Okay? This table here says the exact same things in just a little different format. I want you to focus on is this column here. What we did is we took just 1 year. We took ending fund balance, projected ending fund balance of June 30th of 2018. Okay? 2018, this assumption here, what you've seen in the graphs earlier, but 2013 winter enrollment, that's our old enrollment, our last year's enrollment, without operating levy rule, goes away in 2015. There's where our fund balance is, negative 2.3 million on June 30th of 2018. Okay? Next one, current fall enrollment without the operating levy renewal, 1.6. Taking our 2013 enrollment data that we have right now, 741. With the operating levy renewal, okay, we just showed that in the previous graph. Current enrollment, question 1 and 2 approval, 2.6. And last one, enrollment decreasing by 42 students. Okay? And you can see what the fund balance is. Okay? This is the projected fund balance going through 2022. Okay? With, again, both question 1 and 2 approving, where it brings us to, all the way through 2022, a little over 1.5 million. Okay? Compared to the red graph, what happens if we extend our current enrollment and extending our current referendum. Okay? Just in summary, district believes, the school board administration believes that the proposed plan 1 is educationally advantageous for our students. 2, provides a safer and healthier environment. 3, fiscally responsible for both the school district and our taxpayers. least tax impact for the majority of our taxpayers, and it establishes a sustainable long-term plan. There's the ballot, which is on our website and have as well. We all get to exercise our right to vote on Tuesday, November 5th. And I would highly encourage you to exercise your right to vote, please. Thank you. So thank you. I'm going to turn this back over to Daryl and our board and let him go from there. So I appreciate your attention. Thank you.
All right. Like I had stated earlier, the way we're going to do this is that if you want to write a question on one of the cards, and then we've got Mrs. Suki and both Mr. Armstead kind of walk in the aisles, and if you've got questions, we'll bring them up front, and we'll try to answer them the best we can. And if it's not myself, the rest of you, or a combination of a number of us, the rest of the board, or whoever. I know we've just talking up here as far as whether we're able to get through all of the questions or not. We're going to try. If that's not possible, we will certainly be posting the answers or the replies on the school website under the frequently asked questions, also in the paper. I believe they'll be published too. The questions will be printed and the responses will be published also. Our hope is to be able to get through all of the questions, or most of them. Thank you, Mr. Nelson, as a talking in the mic. Go ahead.
Mr. Armstead, this is a item of taxpayer and issue as well as a strong feeling to school. I think it's best to make sure we get through all of our questions because of the great consequences that could come from this. It's off our opinion. That's why we're here to have an open discussion.
Yep.
And that, throw our questions down, I think everybody should be able to do them.
And thank you. And like I said, we'll try to accomplish that. So,
Why can't we
Okay,
just ask
Mrs.
the
Suki.
question? Why do we have to write it down?
All right, the first question. 8 to 10 years ago, I was on a facilities committee to provide community input into the maintenance and improvements to the 3 schools. Was there a facilities property committee with community members utilized as part of the referendum decision?
was there, repeat that question if you would.
Was there a facilities or property committee with a community member utilized as part of the referendum decision?
No, there was not. I guess the way we view that is we are your representation. As a school district, you're the ones that elect us to voice your concerns and to try to fulfill the duties when it comes to these sort of things. So I guess the question, the best I can answer that is we are that group. So.
Why do you seem so dead set on closing the schools in Apple Lake and Kensington?
I don't know. I don't think the thought process for any of us is that it's the best thing to do is to close the schools. I think we have to look at it as we're trying to provide a vehicle to capture savings that creates the least tax impact for the majority of our taxpayers. I think that's simply, that's as simple as you can make it.
The wording on question number 1 never talks about closing of 2 elementary schools in Kensington and Apple Lake. How did you come up with this misleading wording by not stating to voters a yes vote closes the 2 elementary schools in Kensington and Apple Lake?
All right, I'm going to let Mr. Westby talk about this one because I know it's really not how we get to word it. It's more a legal matter than anything.
That is correct. I think I'm also looking at Mike and Matt over here. When asked that question, we posed that to them, and there's a statute that says that the question must state what the bond proceeds are going to be used for. And in the question, the bond proceeds would be used for building, okay? And so we have legal counsel that drafted the ballot for us. Mike, is there anything to add to that, or?
It doesn't say building though, it says acquisition.
I think this is an adjective instead of lofty opinion.
We don't, my name is Michael Weisel. I'm from Northland Securities. I'm not legal counsel. However, we work very closely with legal counsel. And Minnesota state statutes prescribes the form in which that question of a bond can be asked. And in the school law, acquisition and betterment is how you ask for a school building. So those are where those words come from. They're directly from statute. Mr. Westby, I'd like to add to your answer that there is an additional process that will be followed if the vote passes and the new building is put on this campus. There is a strict process that is followed, that has to be followed in order to close either one of the buildings. And that process cannot be commenced until you have placed with your students. So that is not part of the bond question. It's not part of what the district can legally ask for put in form in front of the voters.
Okay, thanks, Mike.
Why weren't local contractors used to evaluate properties?
I guess, I don't know if you want to talk on this one too, but I think, from the board standpoint, we interviewed a couple of different firms, and quite honestly, I mean, ICS has a very broad scope of work, with various schools throughout the state. I think, here's somebody that, this is what they do, folks.
What do they do?
What type of firm are they?
Pat, you want to talk about this? I'll let him talk about it.
The question again is what ICS does as a firm?
Are you in the business?
They're trying
of
to
school?
ask why you're such a broad scope, or why you're qualified for this type of work, I guess, is what they're saying.
We do long-range capital planning, facility assessment work, and project-related consulting for K-12 schools within the state of Minnesota.
Are you having any trouble with the grade, with the West, there are two elementaries, the grade schools?
Pardon me?
At grade?
No,
Maynard, Raymond, Clara City.
nope, we've never been involved with McRae schools.
All right, sir. Any more questions?
I didn't say Clara, but you're-
Who drew the graphs for the presentation today?
Who drew the graph for the presentation?
Business Manager Powers and I worked on it.
Okay.
Clara City, maybe.
Sir? Could it possibly be that you saw INS Engineering versus ICS Consulting in the
I
paper?
got the paper from a friend of mine.
Okay.
And Raymond, what they're doing is they're getting an independent survey because they thought the costs that were presented on their school were overinflated. Like we kind of suspect these are too.
I can't speak for McRae, but I can speak for Mr. Overham of ICS Consulting. He's one half the owners of that firm, and I know that they haven't had any responsibility for dealing with the school district like he said. So, I just wondered if it got confused with INS Engineering because they're so close in titles. Thank you.
And I think if I will, in response to the numbers that we're using, these are numbers based on the best numbers that we have that are available to us with the students that we have, using schoolfinance.com through the state of Minnesota also. So.
Why is the voting to be held in Barrett only?
In an off year like that, there are certain costs associated with holding it in other facilities. There's the election judge cost. There's the cost of the machine itself also to be in those sites. So I guess it was more of a watching the pennies kind of thing.
With
We're
$1
just gonna
million
have it on site.
surplus, we can't provide places for people to vote that's convenient for them and close to their home and their schools that they're possibly going to lose. With $1 million surplus, we can't pay for a polling place at each school.
And I think, we figured that, with the absentee voting, if that's how people want to address that, if they're not going to be able to make it that night, that's certainly an option that's available to all the taxpayers, to anyone in the county, so.
There are 4 questions addressing the same, or 4 cards addressing the same question. What happens to the current buildings if number 1 passes?
I guess, as a board, we really haven't spent a lot of time looking at what would happen. I'm assuming you're talking about north and south, simply because we don't know if we're going to be leaving them. So we really haven't done much work with that, quite honestly.
I think the other thing that I would add to that is that I believe that if we had a plan for both north and south elementaries at this juncture in the game, would be really presumptuous. And I think you would say to us, see, you had this planned all along. And the truth of the matter is that it's not. We don't know if we're leaving north and south. And so it makes it very difficult to go out and have that conversation with anyone in regards to what might happen to that building.
If you had to tear down north and south, how would that affect your projected $2.6 million for 2018, the cost of tearing down these 2 buildings?
Well, that's an assumption that you would tear them down and not.
Your graph is on the assumption that the vote goes through. If you have to tear the buildings down as part of the
Or would they be repurposed?
Then how much would that reduce that?
Or they could be repurposed. I don't know. Like I said, we haven't spent much time with that. When we look at these numbers and knowing full well that as we're looking down in 15 and 16 and saying, come on, we can't keep kicking the can down the road, and we certainly couldn't come to you in the fall of 15 and said, oh, by the way, we're out of money, can you help us out? Okay, and so thank you for that. But this is why we're out here providing this information, and we're providing options.
Why are the levies based on the levy expiring? Why aren't they based on the levy continuing?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear that.
Could I make a suggestion that the people in the audience be offered a microphone as well as you?
Well, that's fine. I guess I was hoping to be able to provide a platform, like I said, where everybody would be able to hear the question, having written it down.
But I think there's some follow-up to some of these questions
Okay.
that be asked and they're not being heard.
Well, I don't know that we have any cordless mics that are working right now.
Well, I think they're being
Sir, before you ask your question, the question that was asked in the middle, Daryl, was why haven't we run any scenarios with the operating levy being renewed? And the middle of the table and 3 of those charts talked about $715,000 fund balance in 2018 if the operating levy were renewed and we stayed with the 3-building system. That $718,000 or $715,000 off the top of my head is about $1 million fund balance, $1 million less than the current fund balance is going to be in the audit coming in the next month or 2. So, sir, if you had a question, or Daryl, if you want to continue.
But you mentioned repurposing. Today I drove around the town of Elba Lake. There are 7 commercial buildings that are empty right now. Plus the county's gonna have that hospital building that's gonna be empty. Have you guys done your homework? Or how much is it gonna cost to keep on heating that school so that the school doesn't deteriorate where you can repurpose?
And like I said, sir, you know, we haven't spent much time, you know, talking about what would happen with these buildings if that was the case, simply because we don't know if we're leaving them. And so we figured our time was better spent, you know, working on this, studying these numbers, getting this information out.
But if those costs are $1.5 million, then you're down to 1.1 million instead of 2.6 million. And that should be part of your due diligence of moving forward too.
I'm sorry, I caught about half your question.
I believe the question is if we're going to be tearing down the buildings, we don't know if that's what, I mean, that's again, we don't know if we're moving out of the buildings. And if we get to the point where, yes, we're moving out of the buildings, then the focus will become what happens to those buildings and you know, working on it. Very difficult to do that at this point.
Will that be accurate? You haven't made any plan
I believe I answered that earlier, Stuart, and said that if we had a plan with our buildings right now, I'm not so sure that would have set very well with our public saying, you guys have had this plan already. So.
Pat, but if you're planning to build the building, you've got to plan that you'll have that one sitting empty. I mean, are showing the assumptions for the financials. That's, if you're building one and you're assuming, you know, we're making a projection at the cost, well, with that built, you still got to maintain them buildings, heat them, or destroy them. So, I mean, it should go hand in hand.
Yeah.
Okay. What are the options if number 1 fails and we have no money to operate?
If option 1 fails and we have no money to operate, we're going to be coming back to you sooner than later and asking you for a higher operating levy, or else we're going to start making cuts. And I think Mr. Westby's probably better to answer this as it relates
to. We don't
to.
build a $20 million school with a debt of P&I. You'll be coming back and asking for more, and that's the way to save the district.
I'm sorry.
Go up there with him with the microphone.
Kelly, why don't you just go up if you have a question? Why don't we all go up when we have our question?
My question, can everyone hear me?
Yep, I heard.
My question is, how can we spend $30 million over the next 20 years versus spending $7.5 million, and that be the only way to maintain our district and stay viable?
Now you're talking, I'm assuming, about the bond and the interest portion of that.
I'm talking about nearly $20 million in debt to the P&I on the bond, $2 million in deferred MA to the existing Fair High School, approximately $5 million in lost revenue to students lost over the next 20 years, $2 to $3 million in deferred MA on the new building, and including the deferred maintenance on the existing building, would be $30 million.
I'm going to give it a shot. I'm going to give it a shot, sir. Pat, if you can get on the other microphone, let's see if we can figure out where your numbers are coming from.
They're coming from your numbers.
The bond issue is for $12 million, correct?
How much does that cost?
To build.
Interest included.
And principal and interest. Matt, can you grab my computer?
So let's keep it simple. The principal and interest is $8 million. For 7.5, you could make...
So call it 20 million just for rounding. Perfect?
Sure, 8 million rounded. 7.5 million, you can fix both schools. So what you're going to spend on interest on the new bond...
Oh, 7.5 million was the principal to fix both schools. So you would have interest in that as well.
But
so if you're going to compare 7.5 million to 12 million,
So it's
Or
better
you're
to
gonna
spend
compare
$12
20
million
million to the interest and principal on 7.5.
It'd be 60%.
Correct. And then you are saying that the biggest difference, sir, is that you can spend those dollars and take them out over time, over a 20-year period, and then come through and say that we don't need to collect more on the operating side. The decreased amount on the operating side will make up for the difference between the 7.5 and the $12 million borrowing. That's what we're saying.
And I think the important thing to remember with that is when you're talking bond money, you're talking taxed on every acre, within the district, and not just when you were talking about the operating levy. That's simply your homestead, garage, and 1 acre. It's not that the ag land does not support the operating portion at all. And so when we talk about a higher tax impact, what we're talking about is the $650,000 of savings that comes directly from the operating levy side, which means your taxes increase substantially more than they do based on a bond, on the bond levy.
Or not as much when you consider that it's $400,000 per year less on 7.3 million versus 4.2 million.
But the problem is that you're still, at that point, you're not gathering or garnishing that 700 or that 650,000 in savings annually.
And you're still going to get people for 400,000 more per year.
But it's based on every acre. Everybody pays, every acre in the county is taxed on the bond.
But that brings the 650 down to 250 in total money coming out of the taxpayer.
Darrell, let's try this a different way.
Okay.
Your operating levy rate, your operating revenue that is brought into the district right now is $1.1 million, right, Diane? The district would have to double that, 1.1 million. So let's just say that's $1 million more. So that's $1 million over 20 years is $20 million. And that plus the $7.5 million maintenance borrowing plus the interest on that far exceeds what you'd have if you just do the $12 million for this on-campus borrowing.
Where are we going to get all these kids? Our kids we don't have kids off the country anymore like we do. So how are we going to keep the school full? Even our towns are not as good as they used to be.
I think there's quite a few kids all over the country.
There ain't. You drive through the country,
If I could excuse you just for a second, what I'd like to be able to happen, and I asked that at the beginning of the meeting, and I'm simply going to ask it again, if we could be respectful of, regardless of what side we're on, whether we're a yay or a nay, let's please be respectful of that, and let's allow an open forum that people are comfortable in asking questions without being judged, and let's allow this to happen. People are here trying to gather information so they can make an informed decision. Please, let's allow that to happen.
Who is the proposed contractor? Where is he from? How many bids were received?
We don't have a proposed contractor because we don't know if this is passing. We have not gone out for any bids. The numbers that you might be referring to is what ICS is using for to industry standards as far as how much is going to be for whether it be repair. There have not been any bids. There has not been any conversations with any contractors whatsoever.
Is our school district over-administrated?
Is our district over-administrated? I'm not sure I'm the one to answer that question, being I'm an administrator.
All right.
But
let me take that.
Okay.
You know, quite honestly, no, we're not. A number of years back, be it and maybe a few of you remember, we hired Mr. Doc Cheney, Charles Cheney of West Fargo School District, and he served as an interim superintendent for us for 2 years. And one of our charges to him was to kind of decide what are the administrative needs in this district. And at the time of his leaving, his recommendation was that the superintendent was a full-time position. At that time, we hired a full-time superintendent, and we had a full-time elementary principal and high school principal. We went away from that. We went away from having an elementary principal, and we asked Mr. Westby to perform the duties of both a full-time superintendent and half-time principal. That does not work. And there have been some mandates as far as teacher evaluations and whatnot that have happened just in the last year that basically you can't get all the work done. And so we told Mr. Westby that he needs to be a full-time superintendent and we need to hire another principal. And we do have, there's a plan in place for a couple of years for reductions in administration already. So, and the answer is no, I don't think we are.
I just want to touch base a little bit on Daryl used the word state mandate. What Daryl is referring to there is school districts across the state of Minnesota are, by next year, we're in 2013-14, by July 1 of 2014, all districts must have an approved teacher evaluation process that must be agreed upon between both the school district and Education Minnesota, which is the teachers group. And that process is really quite extensive in regards to the number of points of contact that a licensed administrator, and in our district we have 3 now. Prior to that it was Mr. Johnson and myself, number of points of contacts for the teacher evaluation piece. And so that is the state mandate that is Daryl is referring to. I know that there are a number of districts across the state that hired assistant principals, principals for the purpose of evaluation only. And so I just want to clarify that a little bit. So.
Can I ask a question on what you said? Kind of back up a little bit before we move on. I'll go ahead and ask you a question here. Hi, I'm Zach Gordon. Basically, what you stated before was that with an operating income from a levy of $1.1 million a year, I think was the figure that he used, we built in excess of $1.5 million of a surplus. Yet in 3 years, I think it was 3 years, that's going to become a negative number, even if that levy continues. Where's the large, what's happening? Where is the large income of expenses that you're going to move from having almost $2 million in the bank to losing that without reduced income, or without reduced revenue?
Okay, I'm also looking at Mike. The question is a tough one to answer.
Why?
Because of the compounding effect. What happens is that when you have your expenses going up, in all of our assumptions, we are assuming a 2% increase in expenses across the board, right? We're also assuming a decrease in enrollment, okay? We went up this year, but we're also assuming a decrease in enrollment. And so when expenses go up and your revenue either flatlines or goes down because of enrollment, okay? That's the compounding effect, and that's what happens. Now, Mike, I'm going to let you take a better shot at that, but it's you know.
Well, how could you lose 40 students and hardly be impacted?
Well,
I mean, how about that? Let's assume it stays the same. Let's not assume that enrollment goes down, because that's an assumption that affects the outcome of your, so assume it stays the same, then what happens?
Actually, the latest run put together by Diane, Pat, and Matt, so assume that we started out last year we had 720 students. We jumped up to 741 at the beginning of the school year. This latest run with the graphs show end at 719 in 5 years. So we're assuming that we are getting a few extra students throughout the course of the next 4 or 5 years, and then plateauing back to that 719, 720. The hard part, why Mr. Westby said this is hard to show visually, is that if you look at the projected revenue for the school district, if we took last year's budget, we were around $7.7 million in revenue, and we were around $7.7 million worth of expenditures. If we assume that we are not asking you, the voters, for any more operating levy dollars, we are basically maintaining with flat enrollment, sir, at $7.7 million in revenues. However, if you keep the same programs, if you don't look for efficiencies, if you continue on that path, you are looking at expenditures going up between $160,000 to $220,000 a year, somewhere in that range. As you get farther out, of course, you'll lean towards the $220,000. So if your deficit spending $200 a crack, or $400 or $600 a crack because you cut all your programs, you've got no place left to cut.
But again, they're saying if we don't get another levy, only if we don't get another levy.
Ask us for more money. Don't assume we won't pass it.
You know, no.
Correct, but if we go back to that gentleman's comment, you asked why was the 7.3 million, why shouldn't that common sense be better than 12 million? If we ask you for more money, we are going to ask for, this current program asks you for $30 million over the course of 20 years for the 2 questions being asked. If we asked you for the 7.5, that would ask for $40 million.
Why?
Why? Because you need to double your operating levy to operate the 2 buildings in order not to deficit or drive your expenditures that high. That's where that $656,000 savings goes.
You don't say anything. You say, according to current district demographic information, WCA schools is projected to experience a stable student enrollment over the next 5 years. So why are you assuming it's going down to 719?
It was at 720, ma'am, and we're at 719 under the current projections.
I think the 20 student bump this year isn't necessarily a trend. I think, you know, our over the past, our trend has certainly been down. We leveled off, and 740 this year is a little bit of a gift, and thank you for that. But to assume that we're going to be at 740 moving forward, I don't know that that's a safe assumption to make either.
But according to the report that you filed with the Minnesota Department of Education, you're looking at, over the next 5 years, for enrollment to actually increase almost 3%.
If you look at, and I don't know how many folks have access to a copy of the review and comments submittal, Appendix B provides MDE required information as far as enrollment projections. FY14 in this projection model, which was back from July, showed 727. And when you go out 5 years to FY19, that's listed at 736. So that's an increase of 9 students over the course of those 5 to 6 fiscal years.
Stop
We're not going to
leak
the projections.
And I think if I could, I'm going to take this just a brief moment and roll back to 2010 when we were trying to pass our current operating levy. And at that time, we passed it by the narrowest of margins. I believe it was less than 30 votes. And we were hearing loud and clear at that point, you folks need to cut expenses. And you need to make this last 5 years. Don't even think about coming back unless you make it last 5 years. You need to cut expenses. You need to run it like a business. People, here's a plan. It cuts, it saves $650,000 annually.
Is your projection that the operating levy we're going to lose all this money over 10 years or whatever, is
out the previous years as far as what has gone on financially in annual reports. When I looked at it, it seems like, yeah, we have expenses going up, we also have revenue going up, it's a fairly flat line enrollment levels. So my question is 2% really an accurate projection, or is it really more like 0.5%? I mean, where are you getting that number? Is it historically accurate, or is it just pull out? I don't know where that's coming from.
Would you prefer to answer that, Dan? Sir,
That's the one thing we
just for having staff under the Minnesota education model, on the steps and lanes and a potential 1% settlement, that's $100,000 additional to the budget. That's about 70% of the school district's budget. And then the 2% of all other expenditures increasing make up that piece that adds the $160,000 a year to the expenditure budget. If you were to go back to the PowerPoint on Mr. Westby's second or fourth slide, Pat, if you could go there, it might help. It might help me answer the question. Go to the slide. Go to if you hit here and see one. Yep, keep going.
They didn't even touch on
Right
it.
away, your fund balance. Right there, sir. Yep.
Or didn't want to have to touch on it.
Well, you guys are looking that up. Could I ask, isn't it true that in the next year or two, won't the current bond expire? And that would mean that we would have a savings of somewhere around $500,000 a year?
Correct.
Isn't that the debt load on that now?
Correct. That's why we're asking you now for that $500,000 to be extended to pay a large amount of the $12 million. So if you remember November of 2009, we asked the voters for $1,200 some odd dollars per pupil unit. That failed. November of 2010, we asked for the current levy of $1,370, which is recalculated in the 1400s. If you're a school finance guru, you would know that if you asked for a levy in 2010, you really affected the fund balance for June 30th, 2012. What happened in June 30th of 2010 and 2011? Moved your 5th and 6th graders. That, in my mind, is the biggest testament to what we're talking about. The overall plan is designed to do just that. The dollar amounts that we're asking about for operations is a Band-Aid compared to decreasing operational building costs.
How many students have
You are a very similar size throughout this time period.
I don't think we lost any students.
Go back to the graph that you brought from last week.
2009, 760 to 714.
It's different.
Why don't you bring that up to Mr. Westby so he can...
The contradictory ones from last time.
I think that was strictly
Yeah,
due to
that's-
the graduating class at one.
Yes.
Is that the large 754
The question was in 08-09, we had 760, and 9-10, we had 714. Prior to that, we were bringing in less kindergartners for about 10 years than we were graduating seniors. Okay? And so that year, that was not a result of the 5-6. That was a result of many years of more seniors graduating than what we were bringing in We are bringing in more kindergartners. This year we have 69 kindergartners compared to, I think we graduated 56 seniors last year. Okay, so that's, we're turning that around. But prior to that, we had I think it was, don't quote me please, but about 8, 10 years of just the opposite.
How many did we lose in that 1 year?
754 to 714, Pat.
Yep.
What would be the needed tax increase and dollar amount, if possible, per household on average if the elementary schools stay open?
Wow, that's a great question. It depends on where you want it to be. Last summer, we used, for comparative purposes only, we used what it would take to get our fund balance to be the exact same as what it could be with one facility. And at that point, it was 2,400 and something, okay? Now, I'll be the first to admit, do we need $2,400 of operating levy per pupil? No, okay? We do not. But I think what in that model, as we look, what we're trying to do is set a long-term plan. If we look 20 years down the road at WCA, if we're going to continue to operate 3 facilities with 700 to 750 students, okay, long term, we can come back and ask for money, okay? I'm not going to be able to answer that question as far as what would we need. I'm going to throw out numbers that are arbitrary. But it could be, if we're at 1447 right now, is it 1800? Is it 1700? Is it that for 5 years? Okay, in the next 5 years we'll be continuing that cycle because we're not reducing the expenses at all in regards to the 3 facilities. We're continuing to operate those 3 long term. Now,
If we put a dollar amount on that, Pat, we had a range early on in the study for that same $100,000 house that was the impact of anywhere from, we're remembering off the top of our head, $338 to $360.
Does that reflect the newest numbers with the legislative changes in 2013?
It would be pretty
What if there are legislative changes in 2014 that swing the other way as they often do in legislative issues? We're assuming that this is
We
going
will
to be,
obviously have to react to that when it comes, sir. We can't predict what our legislators are going to do.
But isn't that what
You
exactly
can't.
what you're doing? Is
I'd like to see you after because I love your crystal ball.
Right now, along with my ride around Elbow Lake today with the lawn businesses that are empty, there's 25 plus houses for sale. If there is no elementary school, do you think a young couple is going to move into that house and raise their family when there isn't a school in that town? They're going to buy a likable house in another town that has a school in it. So your projected numbers for the first 5 years, they might be fine, but you still got another 15 years, and you're sitting there, you're taking away your tax dollars coming in by not looking that far up.
Whether that's a factor or not, I think the flip side of that is certainly if my taxes are a burden, if I'm an Elbow Lake resident and they've got taxes that are going to continue to go up simply because they're helping to maintain those 3 facilities, they look at their tax statement and they're probably going to look down the road also. And as far as the businesses that may or may not be open in Elbow Lake, as a school board, truly, that is not our responsibility. We've got city leadership with us tonight. I think that's a fair question to pose to them also.